Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of TPSN, brought to you by the Penn. I will be your host this week. My name's Jeff. With me, I have Jake Slobotnik and Stephen Langdon Jr. How you guys doing this week?
It's all right. It's all right. Solid week so far.
Solid.
Yeah, I'm doing very well. I think it's been, like Jake said, it's been a very solid week. A bunch of IUP sports happening this past weekend. And, I'm just really ready to get, pumped up for the football season and everything like that. So.
Absolutely, Stephen. You kind of transitioned to the next one. I want to talk about football. This weekend, we got to witness a pretty great game between IUP and New Haven on Saturday. IUP taking the dub. First one of the year. I know you got to see it a little bit and commentate. So, guys, what's your take on it? What'd you get from the game?
So, I guess I'll start since everyone's starting to look at me. The takeaway I had was that you can obviously tell it was the first game of the season. The offense was a little disorganized at times. Quentin Maxwell started out fantastically with a 44. It was a deep pass. I think it was 44 yards to Dwayne Brown to start out the game. And, they were looking very strong earlier on. And then, slowly turnovers started to happen as the game went on. Luckily for IUP, New Haven also had a lot of costly turnovers. But overall, it was a very chippy game. New Haven had close to, if not over, 100 yards in penalties, so that really helped them. The defense, I think it looked pretty good. They had several sacks on the day. I think they had 4 on the day. Kind of transitioning over to, they had 3 on average last season per game. So to have a big game on defense, I thought was very important. And to hold a good team like New Haven to only 13 points was a very solid effort. I just think that there's a couple of things that the offense needs to work on, and they'll be very good moving forward.
I thought it was a solid game overall. IUP played very strong. It wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but as Steve said, it was, it seemed to me like more first game jitters. Quentin Maxwell, he started out fine. He started really strong, and then, he gave up 3 interceptions, but at the same time, I would take maybe one of those away because I wouldn't even say one of those was his fault. The running game, I didn't feel like it was as smooth as it was last year. It took a while for Justice Evans to get things rolling. Samir Bullock, he did all right. Samir kind of looked different to me this year. Last year he looked like more of a power back, more of like a guy you'd bring in on 3rd and 1 or something like that. But he actually seemed to pick up a little bit of speed in the offseason from what I saw.
The one thing I will say about Samir is that, like you said, he did look like a little bit of a different back, but he dealt with a couple of injuries last year. I know his ankle was bothering him the majority of the season, so I don't know if that slowed him down in a way.
I wouldn't say it slowed him down, if anything, because he looked more of like a speed back. I know during the broadcast, if you guys go back and watch, I called him Justice Evans a few times just because of the way he would move, because of his speed, and sure enough, I was corrected. But at the same time, they looked like the same type of player. I don't know. I hope it looks like he got better. It looks like he sort of rebounded from those injuries pretty well. One thing in particular that I noticed that was really good was the emergence of Dwayne Brown. You mentioned him a few minutes ago, but Dwayne Brown did, in my opinion, he did a fantastic job. We didn't hear much of him last year, but finished the day with just 2 catches and 50 yards and a crucial touchdown. Or, I'm sorry, 2 crucial touchdowns if I'm not mistaken. But one way or another, he was a big impact player. I know he was one of Quentin Maxwell's heavy targets. To me, he looked like the Don McNeil, or the Lenny Williams is Don McNeil almost. Dwayne Brown was Don McNeil and Quentin was Lenny Williams. But at the same time, I didn't. It was sort of a game that was unscripted a little bit. We thought a lot of returning players from last year was going to do really well, but I saw a lot of new players step up. The defense went really well. The one thing that I think is going to hurt was the injured defensimer. I forget if it was either Ernest Shockley or Nia Mitchell.
It was Dondre Tillman.
That's right.
Dondre Tillman, who is their leading sacker last year with 12.5 sacks last season. I think that was 15th in the nation in Division II. But he went down. It looked like cramping in either the calf or hamstring area. So he came out for a couple of plays, but then went down again, and his teammates had to help him off the field. So that's going to be a huge injury going forward. Luckily for IUP, they don't have the best of opponents coming up. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But Dondre Tillman going down, I think, kind of slowed down the defense in a way. You saw the defensive line was starting to struggle a little bit more because at that point, Dondre Tillman was taking up 2 offensive linemen because that's what it takes to stop him. He's just that dominant. And when you take him out, the offensive linemen were able to block the ball a lot better. But I think the unsung hero on the defense is J.R. Stevens, who stopped Williams from New Haven. Williams came into the game, from last year, he broke the school record for receiving yards in a single season. And J.R. Stevens was on him the entire game. I think Williams only had maybe 3 or 4 catches at most. So for him to come in and you have Williams, who's averaging over 100 yards per game, and you're able to shut him down to under, it was about 60 yards of receiving. That was a very strong performance by him, especially with one of the better players in Division II last season.
Well, if we're focusing more on the defensive side, there was another unsung hero, and that was Nazir Streeter. He did exceptionally well, and I think he's new to the IUP roster. He did very well for being out on the field. He had, unfortunately, an interception that was called back due to a penalty, but an interception nonetheless. IUP maintained possession. He also made 6 tackles, which is normally something you don't hear, someone making 6 tackles in a game, and broke up two passes. Honestly, I think we have a solid defensive core. I think we just need a few tweaks on offense.
Yeah, he's emerging as a strong number 2 corner. You have J.R. Stevens, which you already know what to expect out of him. You're going to expect an All-American performance out of him week in, week out. But then you have Strader, who comes into this defense. You don't really know a whole ton about him, but really emerge as a strong contender on the defense.
Now, before I give my take on all this, I would like to shamelessly shout out our first sponsor, the Co-op Store. For all of your on-campus books needs, please feel free to check out the Co-op Store. Now, when looking at this past game against New Haven, I got a chance to look at some of the replays, look back at it. I was on a family trip, but I did read up on it. Take a look at it. Honestly, guys, I think this was an excellent start to the season. Hear me out. It wasn't the one we wanted in our minds because we all know this offense has big-time potential. This game showed me that. Because you know what it showed me? The coaching staff believes in the offense. We took big shots. Dwayne Brown hit that 40-some-yard play, got in the end zone. We're not afraid. We have the capability, and we came out hot in the first half. Quentin Maxwell looked great. Like you said, Steven, just killed it. It was the second half. We kind of started to taper off. Statistically, New Haven beat us in the third quarter. Statistically, they had us beat. They had 2 interceptions, and that really hurt us. But to be quite honest, all of our problems that I saw in the game were things that I had expected. We saw a couple misconnections on Quentin Maxwell and some of the wideouts. When you start off a season brand new, especially with a brand new quarterback, the guy who's going to be calling your plays, you're going to expect misconnections. There's not going to be the chemistry, and that's why the running game was also somewhat lackadaisical. Mm-hmm. The passing game wasn't as good as it used to be because I'm not saying Maxwell or Lenny Williams are comparable, or I'm not trying to compare them, but naturally, Maxwell's not going to be as good as Lenny Williams was last year because he doesn't have that chemistry yet. Yes, he's had the whole offseason. Yes, they've had training camp. It's not the same when you're in-game. Had those scenarios. You're playing against different guys. And to be quite honest, defensively, I was excited defensively. We got some big plays. And not only that, you guys failed to mention, Devin Castro got that interception that sealed the game for us and really made it good. Not to mention all the guys we have already. Amendola, Lloyd. We already have a linebacker core that's solid that can compete with the best of them. But defensively, we showed us 13 points. That's killer. Second half, all they did was get a field goal. They got 2 field goals in the second half. That's it. We shut them down.
The one thing I will add, too, is that, both teams came in unranked, but what people failed to, realize, I know, is that IUP had the second most other votes. So, as far as the top 25 go, they had the second most outside of the top 25. New Haven had the 4th most as a top 25. So you were essentially saying that you had the 27th best team in the country versus the 29th team in the country. And, these 2 teams that are really competing for to get into that top 25 in week 1. And they just had a very strong, both teams just had a very strong performance.
Piggybacking off of that, while we're on the subject of the top ranking, congratulations, IUP football, making the top 25 now. It was announced earlier today, which, it's recorded on September 10th, but it was announced today. They moved into number 24 in the top 25 ranking, so that victory really helped them. Unfortunately for New Haven, they got some more work to do, but,
it's early in the season.
Well, here's the thing about New Haven. They did show that they have a lot of potential. I know, the quarterback situation isn't 100% yet. They had... it almost seemed like they didn't know who the starting quarterback was going to be.
Yeah.
And they had LaPoole, who, he was more of the running quarterback, just kind of the modern-day college quarterback. And then you had, I forget the other guy off the top of my head.
Robbins. Nick Robbins.
Yeah, Robbins was more, as soon as he came in, you knew that they were most likely going to pass the ball or like screen passes. So
Can we address something? One thing, and Steve, I don't know if you and Nick Dudowski noticed this toward the end of the game. When New Haven was trying to come back, they did not resort to Robbins much. They tried going more on the ground game with their quarterback. I know Lupoli was called on multiple times to run, and I know it did not pan out for him. So, and not to mention he had that fumble at the end of the game that sort of ended any sort of comeback. So,
well, both teams had a lot of turnovers later on, but I know you mentioned they were trying to run the ball more often, and I don't know if that was kind of their strategy in that kind of situation. I didn't really agree with the majority of the calls, but if you look at the stats, I mean, they were doing very well on the ground for the majority of the game. So I think that's what they try to go to, is that they try to do those short passes, because that's what was really beating IUP. IUP was doing a heck of a job defending downfield. You didn't see many deep throws that were completed. So
I just know that as we progressed through the game, the defensive line sort of looked unstoppable, and a lot of the plays IUP kept plugging the middle and showing blitz, and it astounded me almost to see New Haven attempt to run. And I understand they did very well running the ball, but
I don't think it was about running the ball up the middle. It was about running the ball outside, and that's what they should have did, is because they were killing the IUP defense on runs outside.
Yeah.
But they were not getting anything because IUP was able to plug the hole. You have, Jeff mentioned before, you have two big linebackers in Damon Lloyd and Nick Amendola who were able to, essentially blitz up the middle.
They combined for over 70 tackles last year. I mean, they locked the middle of the field.
Absolutely. So, they were able to plug the hole, but when you saw runs to the outside, the linebackers and defensive linemen weren't able to get to them as fast, and that's when they picked up those 6-7 yards per carry. But when they kept running it up the middle, I was, very... I don't even know what the word is.
Flabbergasted.
Yeah, flabbergasted.
But yeah, I felt the same way, because I saw him. I'm like, you're trying to win this football game, and you're relying heavily on a run-heavy offense, but yet and it's shown all game that it's effective when you run out the sides, but whenever you run up the middle, you're going to get stopped easily. And for some reason, toward the end of the game, that's all he did was run up the middle, and that's what I didn't understand.
New Haven also had a speed. This is a game that New Haven should have won, but penalties and turnovers cost them the game.
To be devil's advocate for New Haven before we transition on to our next part, to be devil's advocate, towards the end of games, defenses start to get tired. Defensive line starts to get a little sloppy. They're exhausted. They keep coming on and off the field. So it would make sense that running up the middle might be an effective game strategy later in the game once your defensive tackles, your big guys are inside, are sweating. They're tired. They're not holding off as much, but obviously that wasn't the case. IUP, and it's also early in the season, so there's not a huge justification for it because everyone's fresh. I mean, it just started. So I see that, but not only that, it also goes to show when you're kind of at a transition phase at quarterback, especially for college, you're constantly always recruiting new talent, new guys. You're always next guy up. So when you're in that weird in-between phase and you don't have necessarily your guy yet, he may be your guy eventually, but not right now. So that goes to show that New Haven has some work they have to do at the QB position right now. It's hopeful. They're just not there yet. They're going to kind of do what the Ravens did last season with Lamar Jackson. They kind of have him used for specific plays. They might bring other guys out to run different plays. It depends. Like Flacco came in half the time last year when they wanted a bigger passing play. So it really just depends on what they want. It obviously goes to show that they have not developed at the quarterback position to the point where they would feel comfortable riding it with their guy. But
I can guarantee you this. New Haven will be ranked at some point this season because they have a solid team. Their team is good.
Absolutely.
You can see that the talent is there. It's just that I think it was the first game, they had to travel a long way, 6.5 hours to get to IUP. So maybe that was,
and that's over bus. That's not like people don't realize. That's on a bus. I mean, you're not. This isn't like the NFL. You don't have a plane. You can just take a private jet. Like you're driving.
You're on the road for 7 hours, and then
have to play a physical football game right after.
Jet lag would hit hard. So
yeah. So I mean, I would not be surprised to see New Haven into the playoffs at the end of the year and competing for possibly a national championship because, like I said, they have the players there. And not to say their conference is easy, but they are far superior to the rest of their conference.
Well, great stuff, guys. I kind of want to transition into this next one. I kind of want to keep this one short and sweet for that way to leave time for the next segment. What did this game tell you about us? What did the first game of the year for IUP tell you about our team? What are some bright spots and things we need to improve on that you saw from this game?
quite honestly, I thought it was a solid game overall. It seemed like all units came together. There wasn't really any major miscues. I just think it's a little more fine-tuning work that we need to do. Quentin Maxwell, he was on our show, so I have nothing bad to say about him, but it's more or less cleaning up the mistakes there, because we saw him pass into some heavy coverage a few times. He had those few interceptions, but that's something you can work on.
And it's to be expected early in the season with a new QB.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that outrageous to think that he wasn't going to have a killer first game.
Yeah, but I think we have a lot of depth on the team. I think we're solid. It's definitely going to be an interesting season, but I'm not calling this an easy season at all. But we're looking really strong and a lot stronger than last year.
As far as the biggest positive for me, has to be the secondary. I was very impressed. I knew going into the season, I looked at the roster, and I'm like, I don't know, this secondary might be a little rough, in the beginning parts of the season, but they showed that they have talent. And I mean, couldn't say enough about the corners and safeties in this game. They had a fantastic game, several turnovers from the defense, but I think the secondary is the one thing that stood out the most for me. As far as things to improve on, I would say the running game. I think the goal going into the game was passing, though. So I don't think we saw a lot of running attack, especially earlier on, because it looked as though the game plan was to pass the ball. Quentin Maxwell came out right out of the gate, passing the ball very efficiently. Like Jake said, a couple of things you need to work on, a little bit of a deep accuracy, maybe going into this next week. But as far as the team goes, I think the secondary is the most impressive thing, and the thing to work on, possibly the running game.
Well, as far as me, I think the biggest positive, we came out and we weren't afraid. We didn't play conservative. We didn't play smart. I don't want to say smart. We didn't play predictably. We didn't play it safe. We came out there and we showed that we had full faith in our offense, and we had full faith in Quentin Maxwell, and that's a big thing. You need to be able to ride with your guy. You need to show that you have faith. When you play conservative and timid, you're showing the opponents that, hey, we may lose. We're okay to lose as long as we lose the right way. No, you go out there, you ball out, and you try. It's not about you fail greatly when you fail. It's about there's something to be said about that.
Well, that's been the motto of Coach Tortorella since he became the head coach of IUP's team, is that he always says all in, and you see game in, game out that this IUP team, they will give it your all. They don't look towards the future. They're focused on what's happening right now. Absolutely. So obviously we had this week, but that's in the past. That's gone. It's in the record books. On to next. We have Millersville, who's probably a little hungry to have a little bit more of a statement game, because they just came off of a win, yes, but it was a 21-20 game against Pace. Almost came away with the L on that one. They're probably going to be hungry. Guys, what are some early thoughts on the game coming up? What are some things we got to be on the lookout for Millersville? Well, Millersville, they're not really known as, the high-powered football team that everyone, likes to be in the PSAC, but don't sleep on them, because they will compete with you. Millersville is, I don't think it's going to be as easy as many people think. Now, I'm not going to say that it's going to be, 50-point game or anything like that, outrageous numbers, but I would expect this one to be within 3 touchdowns. And for Millersville, that would be a solid, I think, outcome for against the Crimson Hawks.
Considering what happened last year at the Mill, we're not going to go.
Yeah,
the 41-7 whitewashing.
Yeah, it was an absolute demolishing last year. But as far as IUP goes, I think this is a great time to showcase your offense and to showcase what you have as far as talent goes. And maybe if you do get up to a certain point that you're winning by, maybe see some of those younger guys get in and see what they're able to do. It's always a good thing to see what you have behind you, just in case, knock on wood, anyone gets injured. And that's what I'm going to expect out of this game. I'm going to expect the Crimson Hawks to win, but don't sleep entirely on Millersville.
No. Any given team, any given day. I mean, I know I'm taking it from the NFL. I know that's a rule for NFL, but I think that applies to football. Football's a sport where it's a team sport. If you're not feeling it on one side of the ball, that can completely change the outcome of the game. So, Jake, get your point out, but just I think any team can win any day.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's not going to be as easy as it was last year. 41-7, it was a pretty uneventful game last year, which bringing into a new year, it's going to usher in it's going to usher 2 new teams in. And I honestly think it's going to be a closer game than a lot of people think. Not to mention, they got their first one against Pace, and Pace is known to have a good football program. And one thing that really strikes me about Millersville, though, one thing that IUP needs to focus on right now, they only had 5 tackles for loss in that game against Pace and only had 16 yards to prove from it. So they're not as strong defensively as they are offensively. Offensively, they have a lot of assets. They can go deep into their depth chart. And that's one thing that I think is going to – it might cause a problem to IUP. But, I mean, if their defense – you got to look at it. If they barely get any tackles for loss, they barely give up any yards with it, take advantage of it. They didn't have any interceptions last game either and only one forced fumble. I don't know how that turned out, but if they can tear apart the defense, they're going to have a good time winning today or winning against Millersville.
Well, the one thing I think we need to be on the lookout for and not take for granted, their rushing game, their ground attack. They're not in their first game.
Millersville has always been known for a rushing attack more than a passing.
Well,
attack.
and in their last game, they only had 215 yards passing, which isn't terrible, but not stupendous either. 163 yards rushing combined, between running backs, QB, scrambles, but still, 163 yards rushing is a lot. They killed Pace in that category. Pace only had 97. So you need to be on the lookout for that, especially considering the game we just played against. I mean, we need to not get lazy. We can't afford to get, it's Millersville. We just took down New Haven, who, Steven said, close to us in the rankings. We can't get lazy. We have to respect their game because once they get a good rushing game going, then the quarterback starts to feel a little loose. He starts to feel okay. He starts to make some deeper passes than he normally would. He starts to get a little more cocky. So you need to make sure you shut down that running game because I don't think – I even talked about in the interview with Quinn and Maxwell – you cannot underestimate how good it is to have a solid rushing attack because it frees up the quarterback. And even Quentin said, he's like, oh, yeah, we have Justice and Samir back there. I'm comfortable. We got those guys to bail us out. They're consistent. So we need to be on the lookout for that. And then, obviously, Jake, we need to take advantage of their not poor, but not as strong defensive line as other teams we play, especially New Haven. Their defense was so stout. Take advantage of that, and especially towards the running game, really take advantage of that. That's where we'll come in the most effective. Use Justice, use Samir, just punch it up the gut.
And with the way they made progress last week, it would be no shock to me that they resorted to them again this week just because of how good they were. But, again, it's how you stop the opponent on defense, especially in the rushing category. But IUP shows blitz a lot, and they normally adapt. It's not always a blitz when they show it. They adapt to the situation and they're able to bring someone down with ease. So
the one thing I will say about this game as well is that if you know that Dondre Tillman is not 100% to play, do not play him because they need him for the later games this season, especially as we get into that the 2 weeks where it's either do or die as far as the playoffs go. Cal and Slippery Rock. So you need to make sure that Dondre Tillman is 100%, and if he's not 100%, just rest him for a game. Resting a player is not going to hurt you.
No, especially you need to look at the pros and cons. Resting for one game or potentially being injured for the rest of the season. You have to take that gravity and just kind of weigh it out. So kind of before we go on to our last segment, I'm going to shamelessly plug our last sponsor, which is Crimson Hawk Rentals. If you need a rental, give them a call. So on the last bit, we're going to finish on a lighthearted note here. This was the first game for tailgating at IUP, new rule instituted in this year. How'd you guys think? You guys were actually at the game and kind of got to witness it. What'd you guys see from it? I know I read stories on it and got some firsthand accounts from people who were actually there, but what were your guys' opinions on that?
I do think it's a good idea. I do think it's going to bring more fans in. My only issue that could ensue is what if people take it too far? They get too drunk, too early, problems can be caused. But again, that's just that's an issue that is always brought up whenever you think of drinking. So, of course, it's on the front mind of everyone. But I do think it's a good thing for the fans. They get interactive. Now that alcohol is legal, it's going to bring more people out, and they're more inclined to stay for the game. I don't think I've met someone who only tailgates and not goes to the game, especially D2 college, but. It's definitely going to bring fans closer together and going to bring more attendance to Miller Stadium.
I was very impressed with how the outcome of the tailgating and the outcome of the game. It seemed as though it did bring in a lot of fans. That stadium on the home side at least was absolutely packed. Not many seats were left over. No. I was very impressed by the attendance, and even people lined up around the gate. That's when you know that it's a packed crowd, because I was here a couple of years ago when they were playing against Ashland, for instance, on a Thursday night, and there was not a single seat, and the entire way around the track was just packed with IUP fans, and that's exactly what this tailgate brought. I did not see any sort of, misconducts or anything like that by individuals who tailgated and then came in. Everyone was mature about it, acted it as though they were going to an actual, just an NFL game. Tailgating before an NFL game and then going inside the football stadium. I saw very mature adults. That's one thing I was a bit worried about is, especially since you're out of college, are they going to be able to act mature? But I think overall it was a very good turnout. I'm expecting a bigger turnout as the weeks go on. Maybe a better conversation would be maybe after homecoming, just to see how the turnout is. And like I said, I think it's selling tickets. I think it's bringing in more fans. And there's a lot more events for, the fans this year than there has been in the past.
I think it was a good test run for sure. I only heard one story of said person being disciplined. I'm obviously not going to say it I don't want to disclose that. But the thing is, I think what's going to say a lot is the next game coming up on the 21st, because they are emphasizing heavily that game, that they want people to come tailgate. A lot of people don't know yet. It's not out there, because if you don't go on the IUP homepage, you probably wouldn't know about it yet. So they're making a big deal. They want to fill the stands, and that's awesome, and I'm all for it. But if there's going to be a time where it shows us that maybe we're not ready for it, it will be that game. It will be packed. It will be absolutely insane. So I want to see how we handle the responsibility then, because I love it. I'm with Steve. Anything to get more people to come and support our athletics, I'm all for, because our football team's phenomenal.
I was going to say, especially now that we're nationally ranked again, I noticed that whenever a team is nationally ranked, there's more fans that come in, and especially IUP, because, let's be honest, no one wants to go see a lower Division II school that's getting killed week in, week out. You have an IUP team that's nationally ranked again, and they're going to be competing for a playoff spot. They're going to be competing for a national championship, hopefully. So if you're able to bring in more fans and get that attention, then it looks good not only for you, it looks good for the athletics program, and it looks good for the university as a whole.
Absolutely. And, especially with attendance down for almost all colleges nationwide, it's definitely anything to get people more interested, spark the interest, get interested in anything on the university. I take it as a positive. As long as, obviously, you don't take advantage of it, I'm all for it.
And that's what I said. So far, it's been very good. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff for the fans this year. And I really like, what the athletics program is doing, not only for their athletes, but also for the fans. And it's kind of, bringing the athletes closer to the fans in a way, because, now you're able to get more fans into the events. And hopefully this extends not only into football, but, into basketball games, and hopefully into other sports that doesn't really get a lot of attention, almost like, soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, all these sports that don't have a whole ton of fans, but to bring in just one more fan each game is a positive.
It was worth it. It was worth it.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, that's all we have for this edition of TPSN. As always, new editions coming out every Thursday. Well, for you guys, Friday, but Thursday for us. But, thank you, everybody. As always, read the Penn every Tuesday and Friday. Be sure to read some articles. I know I have one in there for the IUP football. I know Jake has a lot of his culture editors writing some stuff, Steven, obviously. So please give that a read, guys. As always, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.